A couple of years ago, my friend Harshita recommended me this book, Creating the 20th Century by Vaclav Smil. And somehow reading this book made me think about creating a tour of Paris through the lens of this transformation that the world went through in the period between 1850 and 1914. So I selected 6 different buildings and landmarks in Paris that will help me tell this story. Our first location is Maison Coignet in Saint-Denis, just outside Paris's city walls. This 3-story concrete building was built in 1853. It's the first iron-reinforced concrete building in the world. It was built by François Coignet as a proof of concept to promote his concrete business. He used prefabricated concrete blocks reinforced with iron bars. Why is this significant? Before reinforced concrete, buildings in cities were limited and dangerous. Stone and brick structures required very thick walls to support height, much like every apartment in Paris. This limits the interior space and makes tall buildings practical. Wood, instead, is very vulnerable to fire, and in very dense cities, that's really dangerous. And early iron structures were strong but expensive and prone to rust. So reinforced concrete solves all of these problems by combining compression-resistant concrete with tension-resistant iron, creating a composite material that resists fires, is affordable because it's made with sand, gravel, and lime, and is widely available and inexpensive compared to cutting stone or large blocks of timber. But why didn't we have reinforced concrete earlier than this? Well, cement in its modern form was invented in 1824, and very high quality cement wasn't really available until the middle of the 1800s. Second, structural engineering knowledge was needed. Engineers had to understand that concrete is strong in compression but weak in tension, and that you need iron to compensate for this, and that you can combine the two to get this effect. And third, large-scale steel production was not really possible until the Bessemer process, which was invented a couple of years later in 1856. With the Bessemer process, the cost of steel went from $200 per ton to around 30, so 1 order of magnitude. From this experimental house, reinforced concrete spread everywhere, and by the early 20th century, it was used for buildings, bridges, and infrastructure everywhere. And today, it's really hard to imagine the present world without reinforced concrete. The second transformation of the modern world is electric lighting. In 1878, in Place de la Concorde, the first electric streetlights were installed. These were arc lamps, known as Yablochkov candles, marking Paris's early adoption of electric lighting, which replaced gas and oil lamps. The way these candles work is that there's 2 parallel carbon rods separated by a clay insulator, and when connected to alternating current, an arc forms between the 2 carbon tips, creating very bright light. The main insight was that both the carbon rods and the clay insulator burn at pretty much the same rate. So with this simple design, electric lighting was made practical for the first time. Each candle would last about 1 or 2 hours before needing replacement. But you could arrange these candles in groups with multiple candles to provide continuous lighting. These candles earned Paris the nickname City of Light, as department stores and theaters adopted them in the late 1870s. Just 2 years later, in 1880, Edison started industrial production of incandescent light bulbs. The availability of cheap, safe light improved quality of life at home, allowing everyone to read or work after dark, preventing fires, and building out the first electric grids that enabled further innovations. Our modern life couldn't exist without electric light. In 1876, Alexander Bell patented the telephone, and commercial service began within a year. At 10 Place de la Bourse, in 1880, we find the site of Paris's first telephone exchange, just 4 years after the initial patent. Before telephones, long-distance communication meant physical transportation of messages. A letter could take days or weeks to reach its destination. Telegraphs had improved this situation starting from the 1840s, but they required operators to send and receive coded messages, so they weren't that accessible. The telephone revolutionized communication by allowing direct, immediate voice conversations between distant parties without any kind of training. You could just pick up a receiver and start speaking. Paris's first telephone exchange at Place de la Bourse initially only connected a handful of subscribers. Operators manually connected calls by physically plugging in wires into a switchboard. Each call required a human intervention to establish and terminate. The technology behind early telephone networks was very simple by modern standards. You just had a carbon microphone that converted sound waves into electrical signals. These signals traveled through copper wires to the exchange. An operator then would physically connect the caller's line to the recipients. And at the receiving end, you had an electromagnetic receiver that converted the electrical signals back into sound. Despite this simplicity, the impact was profound. So emergencies could be reported instantly, and you could finally maintain social relationships despite physical distance. The telephone network expanded rapidly in Paris and worldwide. By 1886, Paris had over 8,000 telephone subscribers. The Place de la Bourse exchange represents a beginning of a communication revolution that continues today. The network infrastructure that was initially built for telephones would eventually carry other forms of communication, from fax machines to internet data. While the technologies have evolved dramatically, the core concept remains: a global network connecting people across vast distances, enabling instant communication. Bois de Boulogne, 1887. Just a year after this painting by Van Gogh was completed, the first car race was held in Paris in the same park. The record books show that on this day, Georges Bouton won the world's first motor race. But it wasn't exactly the kind of race that we imagine nowadays, as Bouton and his co-pilot Delion were the only ones taking part. And in fact, they weren't even driving a car, they were driving a steam-powered quadricycle. The event was a test organized by the newspaper Le Vélocipède to see if Bouton's machine could make the 2-kilometer distance between the Neuilly Bridge in Paris and Bois de Boulogne. To his credit, Georges Bouton crossed the finish line at a crazy speed of 60 kilometers per hour, which is around 37 miles an hour. That was the start of the Dion-Bouton company, which for a while in the early 20th century was the largest car manufacturer in the world. Our fifth stop is Boulevard de Capucines, specifically the Grand Café at number 14. This elegant building was the site of a revolutionary moment on December 28th, 1895. The world's first commercial film screening by the Lumiere Brothers. Before motion pictures, visual entertainment was limited to static images, magic lanterns, or live performances. At the Grand Café, Auguste and Louis Lumière set up their cinématographe, an ingenious device that could record, develop, and project moving images all in one machine. They charged one franc admission and showed 10 short films, each about 50 seconds long. The most famous was Workers Leaving the Lumiere Factory, simply showing employees exiting the brothers' photographic plate factory at the end of a workday. Only 33 people attended this first screening, but word spread quickly. Within days, over 2,000 Parisians were lining up daily to witness this marvel. The Lumiere brothers had created not just a new technology, but an entirely new medium of expression and a new industry. Technological breakthroughs required were significant. The cinématographe needed flexible celluloid film, invented by George Eastman in 1889, a mechanism to advance film intermittently rather than continuously. This was the Lumiere's key innovation. Sufficient light sources for projection, and precision optics for both capture and projection. Within months of this first screening, cinemas began opening throughout Europe and America. By 1900, film had become a global phenomenon. Today, the Grand Café no longer exists, unfortunately, but the location is now part of the Hotel Scribe. Our final stop is the iconic Tour Eiffel, which is more than just a marvel of structural engineering. It was built originally in 1889 for the Universal Exposition and was planned as a temporary structure with a 20-year permit. But in 1903, it found a new purpose that secured its permanent place in the Parisian skyline. It became a hub for wireless telegraphy. Captain Gustave Ferrier of the French military recognized the tower's potential as a perfect antenna for long-distance radio communication. At 300 meters tall, it provided unprecedented height for transmitting electromagnetic waves across vast distances. By 1904, the Eiffel Tower had been transformed into a military radiotelegraphy station with its massive antenna enabling transmissions up to 400 kilometers away. Before wireless telegraphy, long-distance communication still faced significant limitations. Telegraph lines required physical infrastructure that was vulnerable to damage. Marine communication was impossible once ships left port. And in military contexts, armies still relied on carrier pigeons and visual signaling systems that were entirely dependent on weather conditions. Wireless telegraphy changed everything by enabling communication without physical connections between sender and receiver. This technology relied on several critical developments. First, Heinrich Hertz had experimentally proven the existence of electromagnetic waves in 1887. Second, Guglielmo Marconi had developed a practical wireless telegraph system in the 1890s. And third, the growing understanding of radio wave propagation revealed that antenna height dramatically increased transmission range, making the Tour Eiffel an ideal location. The radio technology pioneered here would evolve into television broadcasting, radar systems, satellite communications, cellular networks, and eventually Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. The smartphone in your pocket is a direct descendant of the systems that began at the telephone exchanges like the one at Place de la Bourse, and the radio communication pioneered right here at the Tour Eiffel. These technologies converged to create our hyper-connected modern world, where instantaneous global communication is something we take for granted. From reinforced concrete to electric lighting, from telephones to automobiles, from motion pictures to wireless communication, these 6 Parisian landmarks tell the story of a world transformed in just a few decades. The technological revolution that occurred between 1850 and 1914 laid a foundation for our modern life, and Paris was at the center of this transformation. Well, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have any feedback or ideas on other videos I could make, or just feedback on how I can get better at this, just let me know in the comments. And until next time, goodbye.